know he'll fly over there to the land. What?
I was telling LeAnn it was in my hair when we
Well, dummy.
got in the house.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, they took in,
Reserves back
Yeah.
in and stuff like that, you know.
but see, they didn't have no reserves when the
That
first one
fly
came
was there
along.
on that door. Right down at the bottom.
How was it like during World War II?
What was it like?
Well, I'm not really sure what she means. I guess how was life?
Where we had
What
to
was
use the
life?
Well, it was
books,
like
stamp books,
all the young men were gone,
and it was a
and if you were
Turn
old
toward
enough,
Terry now.
I
if you were
thought
old enough to date, everybody was gone.
Is
And,
that when we had the stamp books?
Yeah.
So when you had to
Well, we had
all
to-
that ration stamps and stuff.
Ration our shoes, our stamps, our
We
food.
didn't have nylon hose or
Yeah, anything like that, just had to, you could just have so many shoes per year,
2 pack.
How many?
two pair.
I don't even remember that.
I remember very well using my shoe stamps.
I couldn't afford many shoes then. I was working. I couldn't afford many shoes then, so I don't get some.
Were you scared of the men you were fighting in the war?
No.
Did you think that one of your relatives would die?
No, I didn't think so. Hope they wouldn't.
Lay back. Feet up.
Was it hard to see your family leave?
Nancy gets, when she goes,
Yeah, you hated to see your family leave.
Yes, you really did. It was hard. I had 2 brothers that went, and it was hard, but they didn't have to go overseas, so we were very fortunate.
Mama knit scarves and for the soldiers, the whole 2 years they were gone.
And where were you when they attacked Pearl Harbor?
You know where you was at, Kenny?
I was up in New York State working for the war.
Well, I was thinking you took Mama and me, who drove cussing, but Mama and Papa and me, and somebody drove us up to see Aunt Nellie in Mintz at Marble. Mama cooked dinner for us. We come back by the Hen Theater and stopped and saw a movie, and I would have swore it was you
Well, that
that
was
took us.
Gone with the Wind.
Yeah, well, who was it that took us?
I don't know.
Somebody in the family.
Now, I was.
And Mama nearly died when we got out and got home, and she found out the war had started. She says, and to think that we was at the movies.
I was still in school, you know, and Boyd was.
But not when Pearl Harbor was attacked.
The first year, you see. And when I got out there, I went to work for TVA.
Yeah,
And
Pearl Harbor wasn't attacked till after, you know,
No,
everybody's thinking that.
I doubt if I was up there, I was probably over there in school.
Not when Pearl
No.
Harbor was attacked, honey. It wasn't attacked till you were in service.
I don't know where Kenneth was in service, but Merle and Boyd was.
When was it? December the
The
7th,
7th.
or when?
1941.
1941.
December the 7th of 41.
You hadn't gone in then because we just got
Yeah,
out
in November.
we just got out of school in May of that year.
Well, he's in New York, like you said, I
So we
believe.
went September 40 and
Because you
Got
come
out
Yeah, I
home.
went in November of 42, when I went in service. I was up, no, not in December, I was here. I was here in Murphy.
he might have been.
Well, I
taken
bet
that
you
year.
anything you took us to the movie, 'cause I know it was
Right.
you. Nellie. You drove us up to Marble, and Mama cooked lunch at Aunt Nettie's house. You took us to see Aunt Nettie, and then we left right after lunch and come back down and stopped at the Hen Theater to go to the movie.
Yeah.
There's a war movie on or something. It wasn't Gone with the Wind. But Mama nearly died when she got out, and she says, to think that we was at the movie house when they started. Don't hate me.
Me either.
my students ask, how did you like the war? But I would say, how did you feel about war itself? Is war ever good?
That
War
would be,
is hell.
Okay.
that's exactly right.
How was life knowing that Hitler was going to take life? How did y'all feel that knowing that Hitler was, I guess, taking other people's
I
lives?
just thought he was a mean, mean man, to me.
He was.
I could never see anything good
He's
about
like,
him.
Well, I never fought the Germans. Japan came in to help the Germans, and I was in the Pacific fighting Japanese.
Okay. For those of you that were here, how did you get stamps for food and other things?
we were issued stamped books. And you could only use what they designated.
My parents did that, so I don't even remember anything about
The
it.
federal
But
government.
I just
issued-
know we couldn't get nylon hose that we'd always worn.
Oh, no.
And I worked every day, and I'm telling you, wore those high heels and hose. And if we ever found out a store had them, we'd even leave work to go get them.
Somebody said one time they got a pair of nylon hose and framed them.
Miss Eloise, did you do something during the war to help your family?
I was in college, in high school, and I didn't do anything but pray and write letters. That's the only thing I did. Maybe buy.
Mama's doing
War
that.
stamps.
And knit scarves.
I bought stamps, war stamps.
Did you know that back then when Kemp was over there, your mother wrote me a letter every week, and she always signed it, Kenny's mother. Always.
Kenny's.
Did you see any gas masks?
Yes.
She did mittens and
Had to wear 'em.
scarves. And she
You had to wear them?
At times.
Getting something. She'd ship them.
Were y'all afraid of chemical attack?
We were all issued a gas mask. Every soldier had a gas mask.
I didn't realize that there was chemical warfare in World War II. So y'all were they were using
Well,
chemical.
LeAnn, you know they did the atomic bomb as a chemical.
We were issued gas masks in basic training and trained to use them, trained how to use them. We never were, it was in an attack, but we had them at our disposal at all times.
You'll feel it here.
We just there 'cause they're gone.
So how long were you in the war?
38 and a half months.
I didn't realize that you were there that long. How hard was it? And where did you sleep?
Well, I slept on a cot most of the time, even when I went in service. When you're even in training, you use cots. You sleep on cots. And overseas, I've slept on the ground, and I slept in cots, and I slept in jungle hammocks.
That foxhole.
And you slept in foxholes.
Oh, yeah, but yeah.
That's ground.
In a jungle hammock. What's a jungle hammock?
A jungle hammock is a hammock that you can hang between two trees, has a mosquito bar and shelter over it. And you can sleep in that to keep the mosquitoes out, and it's better than sleeping on the ground. You know. And I had one strung between the muzzle of a rigging on a ship and a big gun that the one Leonard was in. We're going to set for 17 days on this ship, and I slept in that thing, and when the ship was rocking, I was just like a baby in the creek.
That's what Daddy used to say
Leonard
about
would never
being on a
eat
ship.
dried peas after he got out of service. He said that's all they had to eat
Who's
was
that?
Leonard. He wouldn't eat a bite of it.
LeAnn Kemp was in an amphibian outfit chief, they might be interested in that.
Yeah.
Know what that was?
Yeah, I kind of told the kids that because they asked me what the amphibians were, that they were those ships that came from the ships that brought troops into the beach. But what exactly did you do?
I was in an amphibian truck company, ducks, they call it. We took the first 6 ducks that come off of General Motors assembly line and took them down on the coast of South Carolina, Moultrieville, South Carolina. And we had some of the General Motors people with us. Matter of fact, one went overseas with us and stayed with us 6 months. But we were trying the first ones out that come in. And they formed 3 companies, duck companies, and I was in one of them.
So did y'all just work on the amphibious machines, or did you?
We unloaded ships that come in. The ducks were made so that for ships where there was no docks or piers, you went out to the ship and they unloaded rations in the duck. The duck come in to shore, drove out of the water, went on to the ordnance depot.
Where did they
Oh, okay. So you hauled in like the trucks and stuff that came over on the ships. You got it off the ships and then brought it onto the beach.
Not trucks, but supplies, food, rations,
Oh, okay.
clothing, and stuff like
But they were
that.
the same kind of little truck that you called people in from the ship too, wasn't it? Were they a different type?
No, we hauled troops.
Well, that's what
We
I
unloaded.
I showed you some of them on television.
We unloaded the West Point and got a citation for it for doing it in I believe it's 72 hours. They give us 4 ducks, and we had
What I'll do when
when
they
we
shoot
hit
around.
the beach while the MPs had just waved us on.
You
They
gave me
give
that.
us
I those. What kind of like?
they needed to get it out of the bay, because of
This is
the
sass.
bag.
I don't
Right.
know about them down there.
Well, what did y'all eat in while you were in service? What did you eat?
Well, usually dehydrated foods. Potatoes were dehydrated, the eggs were dehydrated, and most of that type of stuff.
Well, did you get to add water back to it, or was it just dry?
We gotta add water to it and
Okay.
cook it.
Because I was going to say, it seems like it wouldn't have been very good if you didn't get to add the water back to it.
Tom said they had,
Daddy
said
said,
they'd make tubfuls of lemonade. Said they had more lemonade. Said they kept them loaded down with lemonade on account of my nose.
That old beef stew.
You know, male ham,
like Dinty Moore beef stew.
tin or something.
And Dad said they used to have cold cuts a lot on the ship. On board ship, they'd have cold cuts a lot.
Well, they lived on the beach then. He did.
Mhm.
That's where they stayed on the beach.
Right.
We had to eat on the ship when they moved.
Well, did you want to go to war?
Now,
Okay. It's okay. Oh. Did you want to go to war? Did you volunteer, or were
Yes,
you
I
drafted?
volunteered.
You volunteered.
Did Boyd volunteer? Merle did, I know.
I guess I don't.
Merle did, and
I don't think Boyd did. I think
he was drafted. I
he did.
guess.
Were you scared when you had to go because of the possibility of having to fight like the Germans or anyone like that?
I was scared about them.
Okay. Now, a minute ago we talked about the ration stamps, but how did you get them? Where did you get them?
The federal government issued them, LeAnn. We told you that.
But where did you go to get them? Even though the federal government issued
the
them.
courthouse, I guess.
they had an office where they went, called the ration office or something like that. I do
Okay.
remember that.
But it was probably in the courthouse.
And they had little stamps in them, and when you bought food, they take those stamps out. If you bought shoes, they'd take out so many stamps.
Now this isn't a question that you guys would know just because you lived during that time, but why do you think Hitler killed himself?
He probably was ashamed of what he had done.
He's not.
And I guess he didn't want to be taken because he didn't know what kind of death he would get then. Probably.
Right. Okay. And a question that I mentioned to you guys before we started, why do you think the U.S. Army was so small that they had to start a draft? Why do you think the U.S. Army was so small at the start of the war that they had to start a draft?
I don't think they was so small that they had to start a draft. If you're going into battle, into war, you want to be prepared with enough men to do the job. And the only way they could get them was to have a draft. And bring them in service and train them. And they went into companies, and the companies, so many companies formed a brigade, so many brigades formed an army. And there were several different armies in service. You had to have men, lots of them, because you killed 1,000 a day.
Oh, goodness.
Back then, LeAnn, a lot of people went in too, like joined the service because they couldn't get a job or anything. And in the service, they at least got fed and clothing and everything like that. And I think that's why a lot of young men went in then.
Right.
That was before the war. That was the boys we had before that.
Right. Well, we discussed in class the other day how we had just come through a depression, and that with the war and having to join the army and all, at least they had a job, and they were able to get money and provide for their family.
My oldest brother did not go into service because he got a heart problem. And he went to Wilmington, North Carolina, and helped build ships, warships, I guess you'd say. So that's another phase of what people could do if they weren't able to, go into the service.
Okay.
They didn't have to, but that was the thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
But they made a whole lot more money than the soldiers did.
Okay. Were you sad when your family members died? And I think the students didn't realize we didn't have any family members that died. Did you, Aunt Carrie?
No.
You didn't have any family members that died either? One of my students wants to know, what kind of gun did you have?
Well, I had a 30-06 automatic and a 30 caliber carbine. And that was the one we carried later. When I first went in, I was trained with a 1903 Springfield.
That's an old.
That's an old World War I gun. And then we had the 30-06 automatic rifles then. But then they're for people in battle, like the infantry people, those are. But all troops had some kind of weapon or other that they had all the time. And if you wasn't out there fighting, on the front lines, you might have the carbines. They were a smaller gun, and with the fire that the other guns did.
Okay.
Weapons.
You ask him about when they were bombed, at like daytime or night, what they did then. When they get bombed.
Oh, were y'all bombed where you were?
Well, we got in the ditch lines, or we had trenches. We had to dig a trench around our 16-foot tents, We had to dig a trench all the way around. And that was for two reasons. One was to keep down dengue fever. We'd burn them out every week. Burn any leaves or anything, burn them out and kill any of those bugs or germs or whatever. And then when we had an air raid at night, in those trenches we went.
Oh, okay.
didn't some of the camps have infiltrators too, like the Japanese slip in sometime at night?
And sometimes where we didn't have that dengue fever problem, why, we'd dig a hole underneath our cot, you know, and we'd just get that hole.
Okay. Did you get injured in the war? Mother said you got burned.
Well, I got burned pretty bad one time,
But it wasn't
that real.
wasn't from the war.
Huh?
Wasn't from the war. It's something you're doing.
Yeah, it was connected with the service, but
Okay.
He does have a scar.
That one.
After you used up your ration stamps, did you get more?
Not till time was on.
Well, how often did you get them?
And I don't know that.
You can't remember?
Probably once a month, don't you guess?
Once, I wouldn't say once a month, every 6 months or
I
a
said-
year.
3 months, I say.
I don't remember.
You don't remember?
Approximately every
Daddy
3 months,
got it,
I
I
think.
never did. I have to worry with that end of it.
Okay, and that's all the questions they had, really.
I'm gonna get this so I can give him this
Okay.
and go home.
Again, what Uncle Merle told you about Pearl Harbor.
That's what he told me.
Well, tell me again.
You said that.
Well, I think he said they buried 600 in one grave, but they sewed every man 2 arms and 2 legs back on. If they had a leg missing. No, he said they sewed every one of them. I remember Merle telling him. Yeah, they might not have been able to find. Yeah, but
But-
anyway, he said that ones that they could find did it.
But Uncle Kenneth, what were you saying about taking some men and burying them?
Well, on the way up on one of our moves in New Guinea, on up the line, we had a suicide. It was on the way to the Philippines from New Guinea, and the suicide pilot went into the side of a ship next to us, and it killed. I believe it was 146 or 148 men out of the company that I had almost transferred into. It was the engineering company. And when we got on to our destination, we unloaded them, and they had big nets that they unloaded food in, boxes of food and stuff, and they just put the people in that and haul them over in our trucks, and we hauled them ashore, and they were all buried in one grave.
Just dug a hole in it.
And in the Navy, on a Navy ship there, that one went over, missed our ship and hit the deck of a Navy ship there and killed 23 men on them. They wrapped them in white sheets, and put a big board down over the thing and slid them off into the sea, buried them at sea.
Well, were they not able to send the bodies home to be
We
buried?
didn't do that.
Honey,
Not
you're in
then.
war. You're in war.
You got no way of sending them back.
What post office you going to? What freight depot you going to? Where are you going to send them
Look
from?
how many days it would take to get them back, and what was it,
You
30
done,
days?
you
to
done
get them
what you
on?
had to do, honey. If there wasn't maybe but 1 or 2 killed and they had enough room in the deep freezers where they kept food and rations, they'd put them in there until they got to a destination somewhere where they were going. And then they would give them a funeral, bury them. They'd bury them.
So they just sent word to the families, and
That's
the
it.
family
She
never
didn't-
got to bury
Well,
them.
Miss Kelly
The,
and them.
the family wouldn't know it
Well,
till they got to your destination.
I guess I always thought because there's Arlington Cemetery and other military
Honey,
cemeteries
that's
and stuff that
people that-
people were sent home and buried here in America.
No.
No.
I thought you knew that. Now, Miss Kitty
yeah,
and
I
them
made
got
a
their,
cat.
her brother back, but they did get some of them back, but very few got sent back.
Some got to, most of our men that was killed over there, now all those that, as I tell you about, got killed, they were buried in a national cemetery in the Philippines. But,
It's just,
I made a casket for one.
I figured they
On
didn't,
Guinea Island, we had a rough number that we got, they packed on the ships between the oil drums to keep from sliding around so bad, you know, and where the drums would stay level. Well, I got some of that lumber, and I made it in a casket, and lined it with a navy blanket. I think we had a navy blanket. It didn't go all the way to the bottom, and I put some nails in it and stretched it as far as I could. He had a pretty nice funeral over there. He just wasn't.
well, I figured they didn't get caskets. I figured they just dumped
You
them in
made
a
that.
hole.
That's right, they did, but I made him a casket.
Yeah.
I made him a box.
Well, what did Uncle Boyd get his Bronze Star for? You know, they gave him the Bronze Star a couple of
I was
years
just
ago.
getting ready to tell you that maybe Kemp would like to tell you how he and Boyd connected in the Philippines.
Well, the children know, but that's not.
Now, this is for me.
That's for her. She wouldn't know.
I'm doing this for me and your kids,
If it turns out.
if it turns out.
Well, somebody stole one of our ducks one time. We were at Dagupan in the Philippines, and somebody stole one of our ducks, and Uncle Boyd was down in Luzon, and he was inducting Filipinos in the Filipino Army at that time when I went down there. But when they stole the truck, he was out there at Fort Willoughby Prison, screening those prisoners.
Were they American prisoners or were they?
Yeah.
Okay, so they were the
They've been
American
there
prisoners
all
that had been
year.
taken prison
They've been there all
by
over
the
world.
Japanese.
Yeah, we ran the Japanese off, and he was doing that. Then Uncle Boyd saw the duck out there, saw my company number on it, and he waited and waited, and nobody ever come to pick up the duck. So he wrote up me a letter and put it on the steering wheel. Well, when the MPs got the duck, they called us that they had one of our vehicles when we went down there to get it. The two boys that were assigned to that duck, when they started cleaning it up, they found this letter and brought it to me. So my company commander was transferred out of our company, and I took him to Manila in an old weapons carrier, and I got down there, and it was late in the evening when I got rid of the captain there, company commander, and I got to try and find him, and he was out 4 or 5 miles out of Manila in a camp out there. What they told me, he says he's got a tent down here on Roselle Avenue, and where he's inducted prisoners into the Filipino Army. And he said, why don't you just go down there and spend the night? So I went down to that camp, the place he had on Roselle Avenue. He had a cot in there, and there was some Filipino that was a guard there that night, sergeant quarters. I just went to bed when the boy come in the next morning to work. I was there in the bed. And I stayed with him all day till pretty late in the evening, and I started back home, and that old weapons carry, the fuel pump went out on. And I didn't have a gun or nothing. I got in an air raid up by Parksville, and you have to turn your lights off and stop your motor on. Didn't have a gun or nothing. And so when that air raid was over, then I headed on. I go just as far as I could go, and when it cut out, I'd let it coast as far as it go, and it'd start up again with the fuel pump. The fuel pump wasn't working right, it wouldn't pump the gas in right. When I made it back to the company, and the next morning, they couldn't even crank it. It wouldn't even crank it. From our boat.
LeAnn, ironically, at this same time, that Boyd was over there, and some of the prisoners, American prisoners that he freed, was a lady from Murphy. She was a nurse, and she was Joanne's aunt.
Oh,
And,
I didn't know that.
yeah, and
Yeah.
she's written the book. Joanne has the book. I read it, but she told about being in the camp. She and her husband was an engineer, and she was a nurse, and they were in the Philippines, and they both were taken. And she said that went on to tell about how they hard time they didn't have any food, and how they'd eat bugs and just anything they could find, they'd eat it because that's all the food they had. And when she came back to Murphy, and Boyd was worked down at First Union Bank, she wouldn't let a soul wait on her but Boyd. She went in there, Boyd did everything for her.
She gave
Her
me
husband had
a
died.
Christmas present every year.
And she loved him to death. She said, because she
And-
remembered
and let me
that,
tell
you
you
see.
something. You don't ever know what Joanne did.
What?
She had money. That
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
she had money.
She did.
And
because they didn't have any children.
Joanne was kind of,
She looked
have to look
after
at
everything.
it,
She
you know,
looked after all her
and
business.
Boyd's told me this and that, and he said, hey, of course, if Boyd knew, he probably wouldn't tell me exactly maybe, but I doubt if he knew exactly what, she has money.
But LeAnn, another thing, when, what was her name? Aunt Maud, was it? Her and the name Maud. Anyway, when she got to where she was disabled and couldn't do anything, and she went into the nursing home here. And Joanne, the nurses would tell Joanne and them about it, and I've been to Sarah too. But she would take things like bananas and bread and things and hide them in the windows and different places, because I guess she was still afraid that she might have to do without food. I mean, that had been all those years.
How sad.
It is
She
sad.
was in that.
And when you
death
really saw
Right.
somebody,
Well, now they saw a video the other day about that
I
had the
shouldn't have
death.
said what I did there
Oh, don't worry, they're not going
that's
to
all
see that.
right.
and
They're not
LeAnn,
gonna see
another
that.
thing, when I was in Israel, I saw so many people with the Jewish people with those numbers on their arms, where they had been in the camps, and over there they had all this stuff that you could go see, and it was just horrible. It really was. And even today, they still have problems over there. And we went to a Girl and Boy Scout camp, and the parents had to come in and stay around the circle of guard the campgrounds at night because of infiltrators from I guess the Palestinian people. And we stayed at the kibbutz one night, and the children at night didn't stay with their parents. They had to stay in a cave, underground, where in case they were attacked or anything. And so Israel today, there's still soldiers all around. But so many of those people, and you saw it just happened at that Girl Scout camp. It was a Girl and Boy Scout camp, and she showed me that.
But how did Uncle Boyd get the Bronze Star?
What he did in
I don't
the
know.
Philippines, wasn't it?
Well, I could have probably gotten one if, any skinned up, you get hurt anyway in action wise.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that's a Purple Heart.
That's Purple Heart.
Yeah,
This
Bronze
bronze, that's what they came here and gave him.
I was thinking that he stayed behind.
Well, he done that. He couldn't get out of the Philippines down there.
I don't know.
I think it was because of
He was away down
what he
there in the
spent,
Philippines on
the prisoners being freed.
assignment,
Okay.
and he and another boy, they couldn't get out of there. They couldn't get out of that place. But there's a mail plane went in there, and they begged them to, you know, bring them out. And they said, well, they said, if you can, they was loaded down with mail, but they said, if you can crawl back in there in the belly of this thing on that mail, just crawl back in there just as far as you can go. Said, we'll try to, we'll see if we can get out of here. So that's the way they was flown out, just like mail stacked up in the back of a plane. They crawled back in there just as far as they could go, and that's the way they got out. Now that may have been what it's for. I was down here when Taylor presented that thing. He never got that until last year or the year before.
But I think it was had
Yes,
something to do
Janet
with three of those
Walmart did it.
prisoners.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah.
That's something that's funny.
But he had to trace it down to get it.
Samuel,
Right.
They didn't just,
Yeah,
Samuel
that
had,
Give it
almost
to
looks
him.
like,
Samuel had some citations like that, you know. He had the best missile squad in Europe.
That's
He left
incredible.
He sure did. And he had a
I had a picture of Samuel on that,
You
is
want
you?
Yeah, I know.
LeAnn, Uncle Donald's one you really need to get in the video because he was a prisoner of war in Germany.
Well, he worked at that railroad station that her and them, they visited when they were
Yeah.
over there.
But he's the one you really ought to talk to as far as that German prison camp because he can tell you about that.
Yeah. Well,